Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is entitled The Cavalier Cavalier. Huh? Well, this was the third of the Whiff's old cars. She first had an '85 Dodge Lancer that lasted a couple of years. She then had an '86 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra. That lasted about a year and a half, maybe. And she finally said, I've been working for a couple of years. I want a car that's going to run. A car that's good. Or you could... When you're going from riding the engine bareback, practically, to, this... pretty much anything will be good. Well, anyway, they saw an ad in the paper for a 1990 Chevrolet Cavalier. I've had some videos on this car. There's some links in the prescription. You can check it out. It's actually a couple videos, actually. 2, 3 of them. When that car was actually still around. It actually lasted... That's, well, I don't know, how do you say that, really? Lasted in a pejorative term, I guess. But let's talk first about this ad, and then we'll talk about the car itself. This car was a 1990 Chevrolet Cavalier. It was a two-door coupe. Two-door cars are kind of a pain in the ass because the door is big and it's kind of a pain in the ass. But it was a thing. It's still a thing. Anyway, it's a type of car. We kind of know that. About 60,000 miles. This was... We're going to say around 2000, 2001, maybe? Somewhere in there, we can say. Somewhere in there. 60,000 miles. So for a 10-year-old car, or 11-year-old car, that was not very high mileage. It was. We'll talk about that. Another thing it said, AC, ice cold. I saw the ad myself. AC, ice cold. Okay, alright. $3,000. It was white. Now let's talk about this car and the AC. But before we talk about all that, let's talk about Cavalier. We'll start with this. Alexa, define Cavalier.
As a noun, Cavalier is usually defined as a horseman, especially a mounted soldier, knight. As an adjective, Cavalier is usually defined as haughty, disdainful, or supercilious. As a verb, Cavalier is usually defined as to play the cavalier. For more, ask me to give you more definitions for cavalier.
Disdainful. Disdainful. Why would you call a vehicle disdainful? What the fuck kind of name is that? This car was such bullshit. It had a 2.2 liter 4-banger. I don't remember the type of engine it was, but it was a little 4-banger piece of shit. It was the successor to the GM Iron Duke engine. Now, the Iron Duke was, from what I've read about it, and I had one in my old Chevy when I was a kid, the Iron Duke was a solid engine. And pretty much, if you drove it like a grandma, it would run. Never great, but it would run. And they generally didn't have engine problems. They were pretty good. Pretty good. But that's all you could say about it. The rest of the car would fall apart right around it. That didn't mean anything. But the engine itself was pretty solid. Never had good gas mileage. Had no power. I'm talking about the Iron Duke. The Iron Duke itself, a variant thereof, is used in the Grumman LLVs that you see around your neighborhood. Those are those old style looking kind of boxy mail trucks, if you have them by you. We got a bunch of them around here still. They're still around. They were called LLV for long life vehicle. Well, these vehicles are they are beyond their projected lifespan by a lot. And they're bare bones, no air conditioning, and it's got a variant thereof of the Iron Duke in it. They still run. They get around. They do their thing. They all leak. They're all in pretty poor mechanical shape, but every day they start up and deliver the mail. So it's got something to be said for it. They're all old and very, very tired, and pretty much the ones that are still in service now need full engine rebuilds. Just for the amount of starts and stops that these vehicles do, and in more rural areas, the mileage that is put on them. They're just up there in age and mileage and cylinder wear and all of that stuff, but they do their thing. This Cavalier had the successor to the Iron Duke. I don't know much more about it. I forget how much horsepower it was. It's really inconsequential. It was enough to drive down the side street that you live on. Could it go on the highway? It would get there. Take a minute and a half, but it would get there. It would go, but it was slow. It was fuel injected. That was a big start. We went to take a look at this car. It was on a used car lot. This guy, I have never met. You know, there was only one other used car salesman that was sleazier than this guy. And that was in the movie National Lampoon's Vacation, where Clark was sold the family truckster in sort of a bait and switch or a swindle type game. And he was stuck with the family truckster, which, as we know, was a piece of shit. But yet, as was shown in the follow-up many, many years later Hotel, the family truckster was still around. Anyway, this guy was that fucking sleazy. We went to him and we said, alright, so want to look at this car? Yep, no problem. And I said, is there any kind of guarantee? And I forget whatever the guarantee was. It was not much of anything. I said, how long do you guarantee the AC for that you say is ice cold? And whatever he told me, I said, can I have that in writing? He said, absolutely not. My word is as good as writing. So fucking full of himself, this guy. I told that story to my dad, and my dad said if he said that to me, I would have whipped it out and pissed on him. That was the sleaziest fucking shit. Anyway, there were problems with this car. I said, I'm going to go over this car with a fine-tooth comb. And I'm going to look at everything. I'm also going to hook a vacuum gauge up to the engine, because I want to see the condition of this thing. So he lets us do our thing. We go. We take a look at it. We look it over. Interior's in decent shape. There's nothing that stands out as this is a bad car. Little paint scuff on the grill. That was there. Basic instrument cluster. You had a speedometer. That was good. You had an odometer. That was good. And you had a gas gauge. That was good too. That's about all you got. No tachometer. No temperature gauge. You had a temperature light. We found out that light worked. Never found out why it worked. But we found out that it worked. Oh, we did find out why it worked. No, that was actually a separate time. Huh, strange. Well, anyway, long and short of it was, it had 60. It was advertised as 60,000 miles. It wasn't 60,000 miles. It was 60050. 60,050 miles. Now, nobody's really going to quibble over the 50 miles, but you could have advertised it as such. Maybe the guy would just around town it with his dealer plate. We check everything out. Under the hood is, I mean, everything's there. It's not clean, but it's not filthy dirty. It looked to be in reasonable shape. It was spit-shined, if you will. But something struck me as funny. The odometer is 60050, and it was the old school mechanical odometer. Not this digital shit they have now. And them numbers were all fucking like jumbled up. That was rolled back. There is no question about it. Oh, they have markers that will mark the reels in there. They have a scratcher point that will scratch in the thing if it's been rolled back. There's very, very easy ways to defeat all this shit. You take it apart, you can defeat all of this. And that's what was done. If I had to guess, probably more like 90,000 miles. The car it did not have a timing belt. It had a chain, or maybe even direct drive. I don't know. I think it was direct drive, but I'm not 100% certain. Like, gears would actually physically drive the valve train. Because the Iron Duke was that way. I know that. But you'd turn the key, and it would start right up. And it would run smooth. It ran smooth. There wasn't anything that was particularly pointing to no good. Turn the AC on. It blew ice cold. But it blew out the vents. Like, here's the dashboard, and it's going to blow out this way. It blew out this far. So you couldn't feel much of it. That was with the blower on high. We never did, ever, figure out why the airflow was so weak. A lot of people are going to say, oh, it's coming out the defroster. Nope. They were vacuum-operated controls for where you want the air to go. And the default is the defroster. But that was not the problem. because as you move those levers, it would shift the air around. You could have it come out the floor, and it was weak out the floor. You could have it come out the defroster, it would come out weak out the defroster. You could have it come out the vents there, or bi-level, and it was weak in every position. It switched around just fine, but the airflow was weak. Oh, there's a lot of whippersnappers out there. Oh, you gotta change your cabin air filter. Guess what, whippersnapper? They didn't have those in 1990. The blower motor ran strong. You turn it on, that thing is whipping the air around like it's supposed to. It sounds perfectly normal. We even took it out. You might be saying, well, the little squirrel cage on it, maybe some tines on it. Nope. Everything was 100% intact. It was just weak as hell. Never, ever figured out why that was. But the AC did blow ice cold. And the whiff wanted a car with AC because that Oldsmobile didn't work on that. And I think one of the windows didn't work on it. Well, that was later, and I fixed it. The Cavalier had manual door locks and manual windows. You'd have to roll them down yourself. It was an extraordinarily basic car. One day, very soon after, or maybe even right then and there, and the dick didn't want to fix it, the left turn signal would not function. Would not function in a way that when you would make a left, it would not stay clicked down. You'd have to hold it there. Because if you let go, it would just pop back to the middle and nothing's flashing. If you held it, it would flash, but that's not the way it's supposed to operate. Making a right turn, it worked. But the guy refused to fix it. He said, oh, I can't sell this car for $3,000 with that fixed. Yeah, but that's a safety. It works. You got to hold it. We were young and naive, but I should have whipped it out and pissed on him. Anyway, I hooked the vacuum gauge up, and there it was. It was pretty steady at 20. It read good. It was right where it needed to be. It did everything it was supposed to do. It was a go. Except for one thing. The car's running. I am inside the car. I forget what I'm looking at. Or no, I was under the hood, and she was in the car, the whiff. And the engine stopped. I said, did you just shut the car off? She said, no, I didn't touch anything. I said, I don't think we're buying this now. So I get in and I look. The gas gauge is empty. It was all the fucking way empty. The car was parked across the street from where this dick was. So we crossed the busy street and we went and said, looking at this car, and the engine shut off. I think it's out of gas. Well, he comes over there and he looks at it, and he sees my vacuum gauge hooked up, and he says, if you broke this car, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to buy it. And I'm like, I told you it stopped running on its own. I can disconnect this. It still won't run. Well, and he got all pissed off, and he ran back across the street, and he grabbed the gas can. And he hopped in one of his many quality cars on his lot, and he drove to a nearby gas station and filled up the gas can. And he came back And he put the gas can in there, and the gas is going, and he said, I ain't had anybody ever run a car out of gas on a lot. I said, it read empty when we got here. You should have filled this up sooner. Don't blame me for your own misdoings. Somehow the deal went through, and I was fed up with this stick to start with. She bought the car for $3,000, and there it was. Her dad and I worked on the turn signal. He had inadvertently purchased a new turn signal assembly that included cruise control, but this car was not equipped. And the mechanism, the way it was designed, would not fit properly or work properly. We also did not have the right tool for this. There was a metal plate that with a really heavy spring behind it, and this plate had notches in it, just like this. And there was a pawl, P-A-W-L, that would go into these and would lock the steering wheel when you shut the key off. That's why them holes were there, or the slots in it. And this was held with a C-clip, but a really strong spring. And her dad was a big, burly guy, and he went with his two hands and pushed this motherfucker as hard as he could. And I just slipped that C-clip back on there. How that little fucking C-clip was to hold all that pressure, I don't know, but it did. We got that on there, and it still didn't work. Because it was the wrong part. It subsequently went to a mechanic, I forget the guy's name. Or the name of the place. He probably went out of business by now. But he replaced it, and then it worked properly. I also had to replace the turn signal flasher because it would act up. I don't know how to really explain it. It would act up from time to time. It just didn't operate the way it was supposed to. But that's a little... I had some, and we found one that worked, and it was a no-cost fix. 2 weeks after she got the car, the AC was not blowing. Ice cold. I went out and looked at the car. I said, well, not blowing cold. In fact, the compressor's not even running. I bet it's out of refrigerant. And I went to one of the Schrader valves and pressed on it, and there was no... It was empty. It was out of refrigerant. The lines, flexible lines, were not in good condition. It had some sort of heat shielding. That all kind of melted off over the years. Went back to the guy. I was not present for this. And said, this car was advertised as AC ice cold. We've owned it for 2 weeks. And it's not working. This guy probably lost sleep for a week, but he did fix it at no charge. That was not the last we heard about the AC. The car was very basic but reliable. Every day you'd go out, turn the key, and it would start. Until the problems started. There was one incident that I remember where we had our apartment and I was not there. The wife was going to go to work. She was working nights at the time. And she said the car won't start. Alright, I'll be right there. So I was a couple towns away. Could make it there in 10 minutes. I show up. This had single point fuel injection. It was basically an electronified, digitalized version of a carbonator. Had one little injector with 2 wires on it, and something would tell it squirt fuel. It would generate pulses, and it would tell it add more fuel when you open the intake up more to get it to feed her some onions. Extraordinarily basic. Cranking, 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 not starting. Put the pedal to the floor, it's not starting. I open up the air cleaner. Take the wing nuts off. I think it had 2. Tried cranking it again. I hadn't pulled the cover yet. I just took the wing nuts off. And the thing backfired through the intake. This can happen with carbonated cars. Single point fuel injection, it's kind of the same thing. It fired back through the intake and blew the cover off. I never will forget seeing that cover go fucking airborne and a flame shoot out of it. It was real quick, but that's all it took. Few more times later, it finally started, and it ran perfectly fine. It just was having a conniption fit. I don't know. It was the one and only time it did that. It later developed a problem where you'd start it up and it would run rough. And you'd kind of have like a cylinder misfiring. And then if you kind of revved it for 15 seconds, it was fine. It would smooth out and it would run fine. I don't know why it kind of did that from time to time. Later on it got worse, but